The bunk is still warm when you climb into it. Not warm from heat, warm from the man who just left it. His sweat is still in the mattress. You lie down in it anyway, in the dark, because in 4 hours he will want it back, and there are more men on this boat than there are beds. Above your face, close enough to touch, is a torpedo. You will sleep the next 4 hours pressed against a live weapon in 90-degree heat, breathing air that 3 other men are also breathing. And this is the good part of the day. This is rest. This is how the crews of Japan's submarines lived, not for a night, for 60 days at a stretch. And how they slept, how they washed, and how they ate inside that steel tube tells you more about the war they were losing than any battle ever could. Start with sleep, because there was almost nowhere to do it. A fleet submarine carried more men than it had bunks, so the crew shared beds in shifts, a practice submariners called hot bunking. You came off a 6-hour watch, you found a rack that a man on the opposite shift had just vacated, and you took it while it was still warm and damp from his body. When your watch was called again, you rolled out and the next man rolled in. The mattress rarely got a chance to cool. On a boat with no air conditioning, running submerged through tropical water, some men learned to flip the mat over before lying down, just to be lying in their own sweat instead of someone else's. And the beds themselves were wherever they would fit. The best sleeping spots on the whole boat were the torpedo rooms, quieter than the crew space, away from the through traffic and the heat of the engines, which meant men slept in the racks slotted directly between and above the torpedoes. A dozen or more of them, bedded down among the reloads, in a compartment kept dark for the sleepers and lit only by a few dim lamps. You learned to sleep through the boat working around you. You learned to sleep through the heat and the dripping condensation and the smell. What you never fully slept through was the listening, because part of you was always waiting for the sound of a propeller overhead. Now the washing. And here, the honest answer is, mostly they didn't. Fresh water on a submarine had to be made, on board, by evaporators that boiled seawater, and running them took electrical power, and generating that power made heat and noise. Near an enemy destroyer, noise could kill everyone aboard. So the water the evaporators produced went where it had to go first, to the batteries and to the men's throats. Almost none of it was spared for washing. So a shower on a 60-day patrol was not a shower. It was a rag and a cupful of water, a wipe down at your bunk. Men bathed properly only on the rare nights the boat surfaced and the tactical situation was quiet enough to allow it. And as the war turned and the skies filled with Allied aircraft, those nights grew rarer and rarer. Between them, the crew simply stopped being clean and stopped expecting to be. The shower stalls themselves, on a boat this crammed, were often packed floor to ceiling with crates of food there was no other room for. You could not have showered if you'd wanted to. The stall was the pantry. Then the toilet, because everyone always wonders. The head on a submarine was a cramped, valve-operated device that vented into a holding tank under pressure, and operating it in the wrong order could blow the entire contents back up at the user. New men learned the sequence fast, and learned it the hard way. Add to that the rationed water, the heat, the diesel, 90 unwashed men, and the cooking, and you get the thing every account agrees on: the smell. Allied sailors who boarded surrendered Japanese boats at the war's end described the stench with something close to disbelief. The crews themselves had stopped noticing it months before. That was the rule of the whole boat. You didn't beat the conditions. You became a man who no longer registered them. Which brings us, strangely enough, to the best part of life aboard: the food. Submarine crews were fed better than almost anyone else in the Japanese military because the Navy understood what it was asking of them. For the first week or so of a patrol, it was close to good. Boiled white rice, miso soup in the morning, pickled vegetables, dried seaweed, eggs, real meat, and fresh fish while the cold stores held. The daily ration ran to something like 3,300 calories, a lavish figure for wartime Japan, where civilians were tightening their belts. There was plenty of tea, if very little coffee. But refrigeration on a submarine was tiny, and the heat was relentless, and the fresh food was gone within about a week. After that came the cans. Week 2 to week 8 was preserved everything: canned fish, canned meat, rice, and more rice, eaten in a compartment where the temperature sat in the 90s and the air tasted of oil. And you ate fast. The galley was the size of a closet, feeding 90 men through it in shifts, so a meal was a 10-minute affair. Get in, eat, clear out, make room for the next shift. On the boats that stayed submerged all day to hide from aircraft, the whole clock got flipped. The crew ran their day at night when the boats surfaced to charge batteries and breathe, and breakfast might be served in the small hours of the morning. Food was crammed into every gap the hull offered, stacked in the showers, wedged in the engine room, lashed on deck at the start of a patrol until enough got eaten to bring it inside. A man's entire personal world was about 1 cubic foot of storage. Everything else was rice and torpedoes. Now step back, because here is the part that changes how you see all of it. Every miserable detail I just described was not bad luck, and it was not incompetence. Each one was the price of a single tactical fact. The boat could not afford to be heard. The water was rationed because making it made noise. The men lay still in the heat because moving burned oxygen, and oxygen was finite. They slept in shifts because every cubic foot spent on a bed was a cubic foot not spent on fuel, food, or weapons for an ocean-crossing patrol. The entire domestic life of the crew, how they slept, washed, and ate, was bent around one goal: keeping a 2,000-ton steel tube silent and invisible in water that wanted to kill it. And here is the harder truth underneath that. These enormous, sophisticated boats had been built for a grand fleet battle, a decisive clash of battleships that the Pacific War, fought by aircraft carriers over the horizon, never delivered. By the middle of the war, with that battle gone, many of these submarines were reduced to running supplies, creeping into shallow coastal water to drop rice and ammunition to island garrisons that were slowly starving. So the men endured all of it. The shared sweat-soaked bunks, the rationed water, the canned food in 90-degree heat, often not to sink an enemy warship, but to deliver a cargo of rice to a garrison their own high command had, in some cases, already written off. The daily suffering was real. What it purchased, too often, was nothing. The cost of that life is in the numbers. Of the roughly 200 submarines Japan sent to war, 128 were lost, a destruction rate of around 64%. Of the 10,000 men who served in the force, an estimated 3,500 never came back. Most of them died in the same steel tubes they had slept, washed, and eaten in. A bunk shared with a stranger, a torpedo overhead, the last thing above their faces in the dark. Try to hold one detail from all of it. Not the tonnage, not the loss rate. The warm bunk. Every time a man climbed into a rack still holding another man's body heat, it meant that other man was alive, awake, at his station. That the shift was still turning, that the boat was still running, that the two of them were keeping each other going without ever quite meeting in the middle of it. On the boats that came home, the survivors remembered the closeness of it more than the horror. On the boats that didn't, that shared warmth was the last thing a lot of these men ever had of one another. 90 men, one boat, beds that never got cold. If this pulled you in, subscribe. There's a whole hidden daily life inside these machines, and I'm working my way through all of it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.